Hello, everybody, and welcome to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. We are back, as promised, with yet another episode talking about comics and comic strips and illustrators and lots of interesting stuff. I am Pete Chianca, and I am here with Dave London. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
You are in the big city today, am I correct?
Well, I'm in Boston. The big city, I think, is New York, right?
All right. The biggest city nearest
the biggest city near New York.
to our home. And things are hopping down there.
Things are. It's you wouldn't know that there was a pandemic based on the people on the streets. I mean, some of the stores, as you and I are talking about, haven't reopened yet, but it's actually, there's some life to the city. It's kind of nice to be walking around and being with people again.
That is good. And, the weather is slowly turning. I think in other parts of the country, it's actually spring. Not here in Boston. It's still a little chilly, but.
Well, it's okay. In a couple of weeks, we'll have our one day of spring before it's 90 and humid.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to that day. I hope I don't sleep through it.
It's like an avocado. You have that one good day.
Exactly. So we're very excited because it is May, and we have an appearance coming up at the Kids Con, which is coming up in that's May 21st, I believe.
May 21st in Concord, New Hampshire. Kids Con New England, KIDSCONNE.com. A wonderful event. It's just chock full of cartoonists and artists and people dressed up as characters. A lot of fun for kids. It's really geared towards kids because it's called Kids Con.
Kids, yeah, truth in advertising.
Right, exactly.
I remember, so we went to one. It was the same group did one in Portland in the before times, as people like to say, just before the pandemic, and it was great for families. I mean, some of these it's sort of iffy in terms of, some of them may more teens, some actually adults. This one is definitely family oriented. So if you have kids and are looking to get them out of the house, it's worth it.
They do a great job, and there's a self plug. So we will be there, and I'll be teaching a workshop on how to write and draw cartoons. So I'm going to have to kind of pretend I'm you for part of it, the how to write part.
You can fake it.
I can fake it.
It's not that hard, frankly. It doesn't take very long. Well, I would encourage people to do that. And in fact, if you are interested in seeing Dave and I at your local library or school to teach the youngsters of your community how to create and draw a comic strip, we will be doing that also. So come to petpeevescomic.com, which is our website, and you can get in touch with us there if that's something you're interested in. Today we are going to be welcoming a great guest who, Dave, his name is another Dave. We've had a lot of Daves on the show the past couple of months.
Changing the podcast to just the Dave podcast.
The Dave, cartoonist named Dave.
Right. Limited run. But, yeah.
The podcast. In this case, it's David Milgrim, who is a very prolific children's author and comic artist, and he's done, we'll wait till he gets here, but I'm sure he's done some things that you have seen. But before we get to him, I want to bring up we like to talk about when comic strips are adapted into live action movies, which seems to be happening with a little bit more frequency. We talked about how it's actually a TV show based on Bloom County that's going to be animated, and there seems to be other, more interest in adapting even old comic strips into various types of media. Did you see there's a Marmaduke movie coming?
I did. It's so you and I were looking at who the voice cast is for it. Who's the voice cast going to
be? Pete Davidson, otherwise known as Kanye's Target, right, is the voice of Marmaduke. And J.K. Simmons is in it. They're probably the big names.
J.K. Simmons, who's in everything and everything, and he's good in. So
he is actually awesome. I love him in everything, not just as J. Jonah Jameson in the Spider-Man movies, also in his other roles. Although he's great there, of course. But yeah, I don't know where he finds the time, but.
So they couldn't cast a large dog. They had to do an animated feature.
Apparently, see, I'm trying to figure out if it is. I actually do believe it is live action, but the dog isn't. Does that make sense?
Could be, yeah. Sure. I hear they have technology these days to do things like that.
Yes, I'm looking it up right now as we speak. You could do that now, Dave, with this technology that you speak of.
This is what we bring to you on this podcast.
It is all at your fingertips, and I want to be correct about this. Oh yeah, I'm watching.
It's not that we're not prepared. We purposely wanted to do this on the spot.
Yes, it looks like it is a live action movie, including the dog, although the dog might be computer generated. I can't tell anymore.
Right.
Does that make sense? It's not a cartoon. I will say that much. So if you've heard of any comic strips being turned into movies and would like to share that information with us, please get in touch with us through our website so we can mention it on the next podcast. Keep people up to date on their comic strip entertainment options. And anything else on your agenda there, Dave?
Let's get to our guest.
All right, we're going to take a very, very quick break, and we will be back with David Milgrim. Stay tuned. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. I'm Pete Chianca here, as always, with Dave London. And we are thrilled to introduce our guest for this month. David Milgrim is the author and illustrator of more than 35 books, including the New York Times bestseller Goodnight iPad and the Adventures of Otto series. His books Go, Otto, Go and See Pip Flap were each named Theodore Seuss Geisel Honor Book. And like me and Dave, he lives in Massachusetts, although a little further off the beaten Boston path than we do. Welcome, David Milgrim, to Strip Search.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, definitely our pleasure. How are things out in the middle of the state?
It's good. We're really kind of in the west third. You got the sort of the Boston and the Worcester, and then
you're even further than that.
Wild West. Yeah, I'm in Northampton. We're in a valley. From here you go into the Berkshires.
Yep.
And then from there you go to New York.
If you want to. It's not required. Yes, that is beautiful country. I remember spending time out there years ago. I haven't left the house in 2 years, so I haven't even really gotten down the street. But that's
pretty. I feel bad for people in cities during these last couple of years. It's so much tougher to get. Now it doesn't so much matter, but getting away from people, getting out, to go places, go to a park, stuff, harder.
It is. It's true.
I think that, the leafy suburbs were the place to ride out COVID, certainly. I agree.
Leafy suburbs.
And I should mention, my son is a student right now at UMass Amherst, so I do get to come out that way occasionally. He jumps out of the car before I even, put the brakes on, but then I'll just drive around by myself and see the various sites of that area, and it is very nice.
Yeah, good.
So we wanted to start. I know this is going back a ways. I think this book is about 11 years old now, but it's just so good, and I think pretty well known by a lot of people. We wanted to talk about Goodnight iPad, which you wrote under a pseudonym, and I guess we could ask you why a pseudonym. The pseudonym was Android.
When I was doing it, I was not sure if I was going to be stepping on toes of people that love Goodnight Moon.
Right.
And I didn't want it to endanger my other work, we just didn't know. We were just taking a shot. And that's such a beloved book that I was a little concerned. So I suggested it and we went with it. And during the production, before it was published, while I was still working on it, it became clear that it wasn't going to be a problem at all. But they had already put the word out. So my most successful book does not have my name on it.
And how did you come up with the name Android? Which I don't know if you know this, but it sounds just like Android.
Yeah.
It's like a play on words there. That's a coincidence, I'm sure.
It crossed my mind as I was doing it. I think I was probably working along those lines, trying to think of other fun pseudonyms. And I wasn't really out to create a woman's name. At this point in our culture, this is like you said, it's 11 years or whatever. I I probably wouldn't do it because I it's almost unfair. It's almost unfair in a way, if that makes any sense.
So did you come up with the name or did somebody else come up
I
with
did, yeah, yeah,
I mean, the thing I love just about the book in general is particularly I guess at that time when this was really, coming to a head, but, it really gets to the heart of our obsession sort of with our devices. I mean, and it's also, it's hilarious, particularly for parents who may have read that book to their kids any number of hundreds of times, the original. Um, and I guess my question is, was it a surprise to you that people seem to relate to it so much and that it was such a success?
yeah. Sure, it's a much bigger success than I had had prior. So yeah, that's always a surprise. There was a precedent. There'd been a number of parodies of kids' books and some of Goodnight Moon. And at the time, Go the F to Sleep, do you know that book?
Yeah. Yes.
That had become very big and it had opened the doors more for these kinds of parodies. And I think what really helped this one was that it wasn't just a goof. Like there was a book called Goodnight Keith Moon. I don't know.
it?
That one I missed.
And it's rough, it's just in drugging and throwing up, and it's like a funny title, but it's nothing you'd read to a kid. But this one really crossed over, so it was good for as a gift buy to adults, like parents of adult children might give it to them, like in other words, get off your phone when I'm visiting, kind of a message, or if they're just a plugged-in family. And then also it could be read with kids, so people would buy it to read for kids or give it to kids because
Right.
it reaches, it's rare, it's hard to do, but it reaches a wide range of ages.
And I think I mean, kids are literally using smartphones at 5 years old now. I mean, it's a topic really for anyone beyond toddler. Once you've got the motor skills to hold a phone, the book is relevant. I guess
Yeah.
that even more so now. We just did in my day job. We cover the news for Boston.com, and we just did a story about a girl in Maine whose father was having a medical emergency. She grabbed his cell phone, Googled police, Poliz. She spelled it. Sure enough, popped up. She pressed the call button, and she got them there. Um,
uh,
and this is 5 years old. I didn't know. I couldn't get food into my mouth at 5 years old. And they're
yeah.
this is what they do. So, I mean, it just shows that you hit on something I think that is just universal these days.
Yeah. It's there's so much luck involved in these things, and it's so hard to time the market because by the time you see what's happening and start production in a book, it's 2 years usually before the book's out. But this just happened to be at the right time. It got to the right people at Random House, and I think that's it. Penguin Random House, I think, did it. Blue Rider Press was the imprint. I it just fit. It's like a lightning. It's hard to recreate.
And it seems it fits into sort of a theme in your work generally, which is technology and technology run amok, I guess maybe you'd say. I just looking at some of your panels and some of your other work, you seem particularly concerned about end user agreements. Am I correct? Thinking that might
I
be
did a couple.
an obsession of yours.
I did a couple comics on that theme that you probably saw. They may still be in under new work on my site. I Yeah, you know, there's not a great depth of it. You may have seen most of what I've done on that particular subject, but it does drive me crazy. I really have yet to meet one person who's read one of those.
I mean, and it just, and again, it's so relatable, and the fact that I guess, did you sort of make a concerted decision saying, I'm going to do a lot of technology, based humor, or did it just come sort of organically because it was what you were thinking about?
It I think it's organic. You know, it's on my mind. We are, evolutionarily speaking, just barely out of the caves. And the explosion of technology has been so fast, and there's been, if you go back 200-300 years, there's still lots of technology, but nothing like there's been in the last 250 years and really 100 years. You can start even say 50 years.
Yeah.
It's so it's such a massive change, and it affects us so much that for me it's like hard to not think about it.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. And I guess, it's interesting right now as we speak, the big topic is, Elon Musk buying Twitter and the furor
Yeah.
over that. So as someone who is a student of advancing technology, is that bad for society, or
I
society ending, and is it good for comedy?
that's above my pay grade, but I will say that billionaires are not good for society. So I guess the answer I would presume is no. I don't think we need billionaires. I don't think it improves the world at all. I think it's a distraction.
Well, and if you look at who owns Facebook, and now Twitter, and
Yeah.
not that they were necessarily billionaires when they get started, but you get more and more of these, the oligarchs, for lack of a better term, who are controlling the flow of information. And I would agree that that is of concern.
It's of concern. Should be group owned, as most of them probably are, but it should really be board controlled, not, when you have, well, I guess, one shareholder who has most of the stock, they get to make the decisions. I don't know. Again, I don't know quite how to structure it, but it needs regulation. It needs control. It's it's out of control.
Yeah. But meanwhile, it should make for some funny comics.
It's
It
good for comedy.
depending
I think.
depending on, how obsessed people become with it. I did for a little while, I was doing a spoof Twitter account when Trump was at the height of his twittering. I created an account for Mr. Potter of It's a Wonderful Life, and he
Yeah,
would tweet about Bedford Falls, but in the voice of Trump. And that's
yeah,
that I was happy for Twitter to have Twitter for that
it's
outlet
funny.
at that point, but I think I would give it up for
Definitely.
then we could sort of get rid of some of the bad actors on there.
Definitely. It's a scary world, but I could hardly even take in the news anymore. My head's deep into my own work, and I glance at the headlines and see if I need to run away or toward ground zero when the bombs start falling.
Yeah, you're smart, and in fact, someday when I retire from the news business, it will be my pleasure to never look again.
Yeah, I know. It's tough when you work in it.
Um, yeah, that's all I'll say about that, I guess. Um, I
Yeah.
do also wanted to mention before I forget. You obviously your history is in illustration and cartooning, but lately you've been doing sort of these illustrated comic essays. They're actually really thoughtful, in addition to they're being funny. How did you gravitate towards those? And are you planning to sort of collect those in any way for people to
You
check
know, it, I'd love to collect them. That I really love that form. If it's a form, like I don't know. There's I occasionally see stuff that seems a little like it, but I'm kind of doomed to this oddball creative drive that sort of puts me in a place where there's not really a market. When you sell things in this world, you got to comp something. This is, so that people say, oh, okay, this is like Wimpy Kid. Oh, okay. I mean, well, that sells. You got
them?
to make it very palatable. And I'm not even quite sure what to call them. Comic essays has been kind of what I landed on. I I don't know how I did ended up on the first one. I've always had this deep philosophical part of me, and I I like reading things that are very direct, uh, as well as things that come at these topics from, in a fictional way that are more allegorical and interesting that way. But I like just essays. I like when people just tell me what they think very clearly, and then adding the humor. It ends up being a little bit like stand-up
Mhm.
comedy. It's like you talk a little bit and then joke. Talk a little joke. Uh, some go a little more toward that. Some are just more humor kind of oriented, and those would be, I would say, easier to publish because there is humor as a thing. There's McSweeney's and uh, Points and Case and places like that publish humor. Slackjaw and Medium. I But most of them don't know what to do with the comics part. They
Mhm.
rarely do anything with comics. Points and Case, I think, never. McSweeney said very infrequently. So again, it sort of falls in this tricky place. But some are just more. I think there's one on starting a new religion
Mhm.
that is more commentary, humorous commentary than it is an essay of any kind. So
I do like though how you work the cartoon illustrations in, so they sort of reference what you just read, but also kind of stand alone as just sort of funny, illustrations on the theme. I mean, it almost reminded me of Wimpy Kid for adults.
yeah,
It's like you get funny prose, you get a funny cool drawing, and it all somehow works together. But it's about
yeah.
topics that grown-ups can relate to.
I'm going to use that, Pete, when I pitch
Please,
this. When I
please
pitch
do.
it,
Please, you can.
because it's
That's
like
all
Wimpy
yours.
Kid for adults. It really kind of is.
I'll take my 10% when you're all done.
Yeah, it'll be worth it.
So
I
let me jump in. Let me jump in.
Yeah,
I typically am the guy that asks about the process and the tools
yep.
on the podcast. And so the first question I'd like to ask is, let's talk about your style. Can you talk about how you developed your style and how, if at all, it changes from medium to medium? So, for example, a style used in your books versus the style for an illustration versus the style for a comic essay and so on.
Right. When I started, I first jobs were in graphic design, and while I was doing that, I put together an illustration portfolio, and I would draw comic, cartoon style, illustration, and I would draw and just try to push my work as far as I could, because that was solely what it was, what they were hiring for. There's you need to be able to interpret text and be funny, but so much of getting an illustration assignment is what it looks like. So I just spent hours at that. I think it's very kind of how I draw a lot of it. Just it's not that contrived, but I have played with a lot of different styles, and I done things that were more painterly. As an illustrator, I was doing things that looked digital stuff that looked almost like clay, and I don't know if there's any of that still up on my site. There might be. I At some point I was doing a book for someone, and they kept saying, "Do draw like your sketch, just draw really simple." And I just draw an overly complicated version, send it to her, and she'd say, "No, no, like just like the sketch, like really, really simple." And I'd send her something too complicated, and finally landed on a very simple style that I then went on to use for a number of books. I Now that I'm returning to comics, which was what I originally set out to do when I went into art. My thought was get a syndicated strip, and I went to Parsons. I got an internship at United Media, which is United Features Syndicate with Peanuts and Garfield, and that's what I thought I'd do. And as I was doing that, there was one other way you could draw and write together, which was really what I was trying to do both. And that was kids' books. And I took a workshop, ended up selling the story I wrote for that workshop, and then kind of just took that detour into kids' books. And so a lot of the style was built around that. Now I'm returning to doing this stuff basically for free. And I being able to just draw however I want to draw. So I'm kind of figuring out what that is. I spent the last week or so just drawing comics in slightly different pen tips and trying different coloring, trying to find a blend between what looks good and what is quick enough to do. As you guys know, especially if you're looking at a graphic novel or if you want to do a daily strip, it's got to be quick. So I'm exploring. I'm still kind of figuring it out. To other people, especially maybe to people in the business, not so much, but other people, I'd look like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, just writing all work and no play, and with different formats. People would be like, "This all looks the same." Of course, to me, it's a little different. So I'm in that process.
As part of your answer, you mentioned pens. So the question that always comes to mind is, do you actually use pen, pencil, and ink, or have you migrated it all to electronic?
It's completely electronic. If I'm away from a device, which is almost never, I might make a note on some paper, but everything is done with the tablet. And I just use a regular pen tablet. I don't use a display tablet. So I'll sit right here, and I rest the tablet 6x9 on my belt and my desk, and draw that way and look at the screen. I find it's comfortable. I find it's comfortable. Yeah.
Okay, so for the tech geeks of our watchers, I take it, is it a Wacom tablet you're using that it doesn't have, you're not drawing on a Cintiq so much as you're drawing on the tablet,
No.
and you're seeing it on the computer?
Just a regular plain tablet, seeing it on the computer. I do work sometimes on my iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil, which is a display tablet, and I work in Procreate. And I'll do that. I actually did a book that way once. I've done some of the gag cartoons I've posted, and I'll develop ideas like in between plays of a football game or something like that, because it's downstairs. My studio's upstairs.
So what, other than Procreate, any other programs you like to use?
The not on the iPad. Everything seems to work with there. Have had discussions about getting the typeset, but now they can do that.
Yep.
It's a kind of a pain, Mostly I'll write in the text and then send it to my computer and type it in if I want to do that. On the computer, I use Photoshop exclusively. I used to use Corel Painter till about version 10 or so, and then Photoshop. I found the Kyle's brushes, and that they were good enough, and even better, I thought, in watercolor at the time, at least. And then they folded that in. You have to subscribe. You're a prisoner of their subscription model, but you do get great brush selection. And I usually had to go to Photoshop anyway for a CMYK conversion, things like that. So, I had Photoshop. I had to keep that up anyway. So this way, I just can do it all one stop.
Kyle does make great brushes. I actually, not to get too off base, but before he became employed by Adobe, I paid for his Adobe brushes, and I imported them into the iPad to use for like Procreate. Now you can actually do that.
Right. Yeah. I paid for them too. I bought the brushes twice, I guess. Well, I buy them every month now.
Well, yeah. Now you keep paying for them. Yeah. Okay, so that is great. And so another topic, if we can sort of switch gears, that I wanted to ask you about, and I don't know if this is letting the cat out of the bag, but we've heard, Little Bird have told us that there's a strip you might be working on, or a new strip. Is this something that you can talk about on the podcast?
Yeah, who is that bird?
I don't know.
Was it me?
I think it was you.
I have been just recently, in the last few weeks, returning to the thing I first wanted to do 40 plus years ago. My real passion was a comic strip. During this time I got involved with kids books, the comic strip industry has been decimated.
Yeah,
So
we know.
everyone knows,
Yeah.
you know,
I wanted to be a cartoonist and I worked for newspapers. So
yeah,
I got it on both sides.
yeah, it's tough. And I hope the Globe sticks around. There's some papers I think really seem to still be very useful, but it's tougher and tougher. And, to go into it now, it's just not, doesn't seem practical at all. But yeah, I love it. There's something about that form that it draws me. There's magic in the simplicity of it, and also in ways it's nice to be liberated from the newspaper page, because those have got smaller and smaller, and it was never good printing. Now you can have full color, and more than 4 panels. You can, no reason, really the limit, I would say, if you want to post on Instagram, would be 10 panels. But probably from an attention point of view, 6 to 8, at the most. But so far I've been just using 4 panel ones, and it seems to get the job done.
We typically, so we are using length wise, dimension wise, what the standard comic strip in the newspaper is, although usually 3 or 4 panels would divide ours up the same. But one thing that I've noticed, at least from when we started the strip, you have to get used to drawing in the box. There's a certain comfort level with what you can do in the box that looks good versus, I remember looking back at some of my early stuff and it just doesn't look right in the box. You have to get that comfort with it. Have you found that as you've been doing strips, that there's a certain way to do it?
I'm learning about it, definitely, with the coloring and detail, and finding the right balances on those things. I have not been working. I've been thinking in terms of individual panels that would be stacked, because everybody's reading it on their phone, so this way they don't have to blow it up most of the time. So I you don't have that thing where you'll have like a lined box, an unlined box, and then a lined box, which was a great look, but less maybe of a concern for me at this point, thinking about how it's going to be presented.
It's interesting because when we started the strip we're working on now, Pet Peeves, we actually thought about that, and we actually started it vertically for that very reason, because people read on their phone. We eventually sort of got away from that and went back to the horizontal mode. And what we do for Instagram is we break it up so you can see panel by panel and swipe it. And that's
Right.
how we sort of accommodated, rather than having to have this tiny
Right.
rectangle.
Right. Thank God Instagram finally let you, or maybe again let you, I don't know, post from the computer. I used to have to send, it was such a pain. I didn't understand what the point was, but now you can do it from your browser, which makes the job much easier. But
Actually, Pete does all of that for us. Luckily, I didn't have to learn how to do it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, it is true, and I still often do it from the phone just because I got used to it. But you're right. The day that they finally said you could post from your desktop, it's like a day for celebration for
Yeah.
my middle-aged eyes.
Yeah. I, I'm just because even though I've been a cartoonist of sorts by doing kids books, actually starting to do comics, I feels like it's a brand new career. Like I quit being a lawyer or quit being a judge. Now, I don't know, it's related, but it's like I'm starting a new thing. I have like no idea how to go about putting it out there. I know I've been to Webtoons and Tapas, but like how to actually execute this. I'll be listening to your podcast to get the tips, and I'm really glad to have found it. I only know of one other comic strip podcast. Again, I might just be too new to have stumbled on the others.
Well, we're always looking for ways to get it out there as well. So we're in the same boat, and
Right.
something that, this because you and I have appeared at comic conventions together, but one of the things we've done is we've taken our merchandise and our books, and we try to do as many of the conventions as we can. So And you know, one of the things I was going to mention is the last convention you and I did, you bought one sample of each book to the convention as opposed to multiple versions. So I was going to recommend the next time you do that, you might want to bring, you know, some extras in case somebody buys the one copy.
I didn't come to sell as my first convention ever. I think maybe, no, I'd been to Comic-Con in New York one time when I worked at United Media. So I was just like, check it out. I don't have any adult, well, I don't have much in terms of stuff to sell to adults. It's kids' books. So like the Kids Con thing, maybe,
Yeah.
I'll bring some there.
And obviously, I'm just making a joke because we had fun at David's expense. We were all there selling our books, and he had his one copy of each one. So we just sort of, you know, we're a bunch of cartoonists. We made
I didn't even need that, Dave. No, like no one stopped to look at humor stuff, you know. Like people would stop for Emily, and then they just like go by. It's like we weren't even there.
Yeah. Luckily, we went out for a drink after, and that was.
Well, yeah, that's all that matters.
That was the best part.
Now, are you
different?
Are you in a position where you could talk about the concept for the strip, or do you want to wait till it's a little further along?
You know, I could talk a little bit about it, but you know, I was kind of hoping to just put up on Medium an introduction to the strip, but I just ran out of time, and I thought I could even point you to it. But so far what I have, and it's all pretty fluid at this point, but it's a guy that reminds me of me, trying to figure out how to make it in the world, how to live, not make it like Mary Tyler Moore on their own. Just like not feel like crap. You know, I've been signing my Medium essays, trying to feel okay, one comic at a time. And my tentative title for this strip at this point is One Comic at a Time. And it's, you know, this guy, again, it's developing. He's got a little pet bot, smart pet that he interacts with at home. But then things, you know, these first strips have been about him and his inner child, who actually becomes an outer child. You know, that's the kind of magic stuff I love that comics is great for. So he'll interact with various things. You know, there's a therapist that shows up unannounced at his apartment, you know, encounters with Darwin, Freud, you know, all that kind of stuff as he tries to figure it out.
That sounds awesome. Now I want to see it.
Yeah. It should be up. It should, you know, there be at least something up on Medium. You know, I don't know how to launch a strip. I just figured I'd put up, even though it's preliminary, a couple of the comics are just sketches, you know, so you just kind of see the writing. And you know, I don't know how it's going to look. I say in the piece, you know, it could end up being time traveling bonobos trying to make it in the future fast-paced world of advertising or something. You know, it's like whatever suits my fancy, it'll go there. But I think there'll probably be, you know, it tends to, I think, at least my natural orientation would be to tend to revert to some repeating characters so that depth can be built. I'm not a real gaggy type of a person. In fact, I was reading Scott Dickers. Do you know his strip? He did a strip before. Do you know who he is? He's a humor writer and teacher, and he's the guy who created The Onion, one of the creators.
Okay,
yeah, and his strip is, damn, I wish I could think of the name of it. Some of them just make no attempt to be funny. I don't think I'll do that, but even when they're not funny, there's something contemplative about them, you know. They're just like a little slightly odd sometimes, and they're, you know, it really like captured me in its tone and its spirit, and it's unusual. So, you know, it'll probably be another oddball thing that, you know, 100 people will like and the rest of the people will never hear of.
but that's fine. I mean, I think Pete and I talked about this, like, with our strip, at the end of the day, we just want to, if we just do it for ourselves so that we like it and we find the humor in it, we can't control externally, and you can't guess what's going to be successful, what other people are going to think is funny. But as long as we're happy with it, and then take it from there and just, market it and try for the best, but just write and draw for yourself, primarily.
I agree, Dave. I think that's so wise, and especially in a medium where there's no money. So by taking that out, it's like, why that's all that's left, and it becomes a labor of love, which was one of the things I loved about children's books at first. When I got into it, most of the people were doing it just because they loved it. There was very little prospect of, very few people can make a living at it. So people are there because they love it. But even in that, I was always like, oh, maybe this is more marketable, maybe this is, and sometimes editors guided books in directions that I wouldn't be my instinct, but I thought, oh, well, maybe they know better. Then in the end, when you just sort of a mid-list author and the books don't go anywhere, you got nothing. It's like you don't even have a book that you love, or that I loved. It's like it's like, at least when I fail, I'll have done something that I like. And I've sent some proposals around for longer cartoon oriented books. It's sort of like the medium essays, but probably even a higher ratio of comics to text. And one's on the brain, and one's was on evolution, basically. And when I read it over, I'm like, wow, I love this. I really did what I'd set out to do, and they haven't sold, but I have that, at least like when I read it, it's like, this is the best I got because I don't know how to make this better. This is already the book I want and that I would have wanted to read.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you've hit it right. I mean, art is tough because, at the end of the day, if you're an artist, it's from inside you, it's from your soul. And of course, we all want to make money with the art. I mean, there's nothing wrong with making money from one's work, but, at least have something that you're proud of, and maybe you make money from it or not, but at least you can hold it out there. I did this. And when it sells, obviously it's great when you can make money. And that's even with like, even if I, go into the conventions, if we sell 2 or 3 books at a convention and that's it, so that's 2 or 3 people who purchased our art and our writing. And there's something to that's satisfying.
Yeah, definitely. It's affirming, one of the things that working on Medium, where it's the one social media I've gained some traction, is that people will make comments sometimes, and then I always comment back. I love to discuss the topics that I'm writing about, so including if people just completely disagree with what I'm trying to say. Just to have that interaction, to be a part of the world, to be putting something out there that somebody's reading, somebody's finding useful, is massive. And then the money can feel like an affirmation, but I think it's really just serves practically to let you do it full time, or let you do it more of the time. There's so much luck involved, and so much about just how much do you fit the zeitgeist of the popular market, where you need to be to make enough money to make a living at it. You got to just happen to be the kind of person that thinks in a way that a wide group of people appreciate. If you're quirky, you can have a smaller following.
Yeah, the way I look at it is I don't play golf, so I have to do something.
That's so much similar, Pete. I think I'm going to say that too. I doesn't have to go through that whole rap every time.
So before this has flown by. But before we let you go, first of all, where can people find your work, and what else, would you like people to know about you and what you're working on?
Sure. My name, davidmilgrim.com, will get you there. You can also get there by milgy.com, milgy.com. And I did buy the domain for one comic at a time, but I haven't even linked it yet. So don't go there. Just go to milgy.com. And from there, you can follow me. You'll see the social icons. Medium is where I've been posting these essays. Twitter and Facebook, I always post free links to the Medium essays. Medium has a paywall that you hit after about 3 articles a month. So to get to see that, see if you want to keep reading it, if you go to my Facebook or Twitter and then scroll back, you'll get all the links there, and then you can read them all for free.
Excellent. And I'll remind people to check our website, petpeevescomic.com, on the podcast page. And we will also have links to all of David's websites and work, and along with some samples for you to check out. And I'm very excited to see where your efforts go. I'm hoping, I know it's not about the money, but if you become a superstar cartoonist, we could say, we helped launch your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes too, and keep up the great work with the strip and and this podcast. It's really so great to be able to listen to other creators talk about their work, and there's just, I haven't found much of it, so it's like extra precious.
Well, we enjoy it, and as I always say to Dave, and I'm a word guy, so I was not as familiar with the world of artists and illustrators, and one nicer than the next. We have just enjoyed talking to every single person we've had on here. Just I've always said, since we started this, I've yet to meet a cartoonist I didn't like, to paraphrase Will Rogers. So,
Yeah.
so it's a good group to hang out with.
Yeah, and I'm hanging with them too, and I've been listening to some of the episodes, and these are like the only friends I have here alone in my studio. So
well, on
thanks.
that note, David Milgrim, thank you so much for being on Strip Search. Everybody else, we will be back next month. We're hard at work planning our next show. We hope to have another very special guest to chat with. And enjoy your spring as we spring into nice weather, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.